Yeah, that has been my time, and it has
It's a
been
great time.
it. It's great, dude. A
If
grand
only
old
every
time.
week could be like this week for you.
Yeah, you know what? It is what it is. Not to mention just the war that is waging within my body at this moment. So, and the war is between the medicine I take and Zofran, which is the anti-nausea medicine.
Oh, gotcha.
It's a battle. Right now, I feel like the Zofran is winning. However, the reinforcements that the Zofran has does not
Yeah,
equate to the reinforcements
right.
that the medicine has.
I
So
see.
this will be a battle lost later.
They can't all be winners.
They can't all be winners. It's just I wish I knew what it was because sometimes I'm fine
And then sometimes,
and sometimes I'm not. And sometimes it's the day after and sometimes it's 2 days after, which is
mm,
today.
right.
And I'm like, what is happening?
No consistency.
There's no consistency, but it's weird because you know where there's a ton of consistency? In the food I eat.
Mm,
Like, I meal prep all of my breakfasts, and
right.
I meal prep all of my lunches, and I cycle between really like 4 dinners
Sure.
with, you know, like, that's what we have. We have a very structured routine, especially with the
Hmm.
trying to eat healthier and everything.
Yeah.
So, why?
I can't make any sense of that for you.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I'd like to.
I wish you could.
Yeah, unfortunately, my PhD is in horse medicine, so
I mean, I gotta
it
be at
doesn't
least
translate.
40% horse.
I mean,
We
I could
both
take a
have
look.
lungs and hearts
I could take a look inside,
and
but
hooves.
yeah, that's true. I'll next time we're together.
Perfect. All right. How do you feel if we were to just start the podcast?
I would love it.
All right. I think that's what we'll do then.
Can I count down?
You should count down.
3, 2, 1.
Dude, do you smell that?
Really? That's what we're doing? You're not
What's
gonna do a
happening?
song?
Oh my god, Nick. It's a wild skunk.
Oh man. I mean, I appreciate that you're breaking formula for every once in a while, but I was also a little disappointed not to hear a song. So
Oh, hold on. I got you, dude. I got you. Got it. If I go crazy, then will you still call me super? No,
no, no.
but
eh.
it's called Superman.
Yeah, that's definitely not well. Actually, that song that you sang is not even called Superman,
I
but
know. Oh, you know what? Here's what I'll do. I'll go rip like a sick McTwist 900,
okay. Now
uh,
we're talking.
and then I'll record that and then pop that in, and
I would that would
that'll
be
be the
everything
intro
I needed.
instead, because we both associate that with one of these bands, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, just had to make
Absolutely.
sure. Just had to make sure.
I'll
All
talk
right,
more about that later, actually.
good. I'm excited.
Yeah,
But in the meantime, welcome in everybody to another episode of Totem Talks.
that's right.
This is season 8, and this is episode 2, guys. We are in
Chugging right
season
along.
8. Yeah, true. We are chugging right along with our season count, but
Mhm.
wait, what's gonna happen? Like, dude, when we hit double digits, are we just gonna crumple into dust?
I mean, I'm already about halfway there. My insides are starting to do that, I think.
Oh, did you get Thanos snapped?
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, man. I heard the cure is to just wait 5 years and the Avengers will save you, though.
Yeah, I mean, I won't feel any of that, so that's
No,
totally fine.
that's a great. Honestly, you might be
That's
pissed we
your
woke you up.
problem. Yeah, uh, very true.
All right, but in the meantime, if you're curious as to what Totem Talks is, so are we, honestly. But what we think it is, what we're pretty sure, is that it is the never-ending musical quest to find the greatest musician's musical act of all time. We will
Sure.
scour the earth and the sea and the stars above, and we will
So
eventually
so far,
find
all artists have been found only on Earth, though, for the record.
um no, that's not true. What about oh my gosh. I'm not gonna remember the name of the band. It was from so many seasons ago. You you were it was your group.
Okay.
Like, you were, like, the progenitor of this group.
Sure. Right.
And that's
I
not
started it
what I
all.
meant. That's not what I meant,
No.
but
Okay.
they were, like their persona was that they were from another planet. They were like
Okay.
aliens or something.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah. I forget the band
That's
now.
fair.
I mean, we've covered
Guar
hundreds
is
of
like that, but we
I
haven't covered Guar.
I don't did we didn't cover Gwar.
I
It
don't think
was
so.
I remember us talking about Gwar, though.
That's possible. It could
I
have
feel
been
like
because of that.
could have been. Look at us.
Right?
Either way, we will definitively one day come to the consensus on who the greatest musical artist is of all
That's fair.
time, whether it is a solo artist or a group or something in
Or a
between,
group of solo artists.
which I I guess theoretically is not that's not the definition of a supergroup, but I feel like that's your best chance of
Yeah,
getting one,
okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
right? Like,
Yeah, well said.
there's definitely been supergroups that are just 4 artists or more coming together who are all solo in their own right.
Crosby, Stills, Nash,
That was
sometimes
the
Young.
example that popped into
Yeah.
my head. So, just, we're working at it.
Mhm.
However, I wanna be super clear for all you listeners. None of that has anything to do with today,
No, not even a little bit.
because I'm gonna spoil it for you right now. We definitely did not find the goats today. Didn't happen.
No, no, the goats will have to be on another episode,
That's true.
whoever
With
they
the
are. I
sheep
know of the mountain goats, but I didn't know the goats are I'm sure a band somewhere as well.
yeah. Well, what happened is They Might Be Giants, formed up with a band called They Might Be Goats, and they took
Oh,
off it's just, mathematically, they take off the "they might be"
mhm.
because when you cancel out in
Well,
division.
you put them all together and you just figure out what they are, and then at some point, they weren't, like, in doubt any longer. They were like, "Oh, okay, it's goats."
That's true. They might be giants, they might be goats, and they figured it
No,
out.
they're
We're not
goats.
giants, we're goats. I love that for them, truly.
Yeah,
Finding yourself self-discovery is really
it's very important.
isn't that
We're
just what
really
music's
hitting on
all
a
about?
lot of important issues today.
We really are, dude. You know what we should cover,
Intellectual
though?
episode.
Your name. Your name is Nick?
Yes.
Cool. My name is Pat. This is Totem Talks. Figured it all out, guys. Uh,
Okay.
you know what other names we should talk about, Nick?
No.
The names of the artists that we covered.
Yes. Okay. Well, in that case, we will be covering Goldfinger today, and then also Ballyhoo.
That is how you have to say it, right?
I mean, I wanted to include the exclamation mark.
Which is only correct and
Yeah,
fair.
absolutely.
All right. Well, listen. I think
Please.
with my sense of being the one to give the announcements, so I
Mhm,
will start
mhm.
us off. And I decided we're going to start off with Goldfinger.
Yeah, right, right.
That's my decision. I'm
Your
sticking to it.
great contribution.
So, Goldfinger is an American punk rock band from Los Angeles, California. And they were formed in 1994, and they are still active to this day. And we covered 3 albums, as we are tending to do. We started with my favorite type of album in the world, the eponymous debut,
Indeed.
Goldfinger from 1996. We followed that up with Hang Ups from 1997, and then we decided to take their advice, and we never looked back in 2020.
Very
And
good.
those are the 3 albums.
Okay, so I'll get started, with Goldfinger, which, speaking of gold, it did go gold in Canada. So, kudos to them for that.
Good for them.
Um, and this, as you probably won't find surprising, is a record that actually kinda got its legs on college radio, like it was 90s college radio stations that were playing artists like this and kind of helping them build, like, a little bit more of an underground following. Um, and it was not really super what I expected for most of it. I mean, it kind of was. So when you think of the songs by Goldfinger that I think of, that I knew before this podcast, I just assumed that there were horns in the band and they were on every song.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And that is not the case here. There are a lot of songs that don't utilize them, unfortunately, although they definitely do. Like every song where they use them is amongst the best songs on the record. So I think this is a group where, like, the style of punk that they're doing, while we have had a very little success with punk groups on the show so far, I think this was by far their punk stuff was amongst the most palatable, um, compared to other artists. It showed some flashes of things that I could get on board with. Here in Your Bedroom, which ended up being their highest charting ever single, is good. It's a good song. I thought King for a Day, where like the horns, this was like kind of their first really big showcase on the record, was probably the best song for me. Um, and then there's also some like just a little undeveloped stuff. Like it's a little immature. His voice still sounds a little immature. I mean, but they play well. They are like these guys can all definitely play their instruments. It's not an album that like super inspires me to go back and listen to it again, but I didn't hate it.
Sure. Listen, I get where you're coming from. I don't even disagree with you. I think this is pretty common and actually pretty common in this genre type. In that, like, punk, like, skate rock scene, like,
Mhm,
skate all that stuff, where the first album is just it feels a little thrown together.
mhm.
And it's not exclusive to this, I just kinda always figure it in this genre space. They're young kids,
Yeah, they're
they
very young.
do decent work. I do agree with you that the horns add so much to every song they're in that
Mhm.
it's like when they're not there,
Like,
I'm
where are they?
yes,
Bring them back.
although to play devil's advocate to kind of both of us here, I do think that ska, an entire album full of ska, has a tendency to get a little bit repetitive. And so I do think that having songs without that did help to break the monotony a little
Sure.
bit. Because when you have a horn section in ska music, it always sounds pretty similar to each other, like, the it's like an upbeat, like, high horn sound. You're not getting a lot of, like, complexity in the horn part, I think, for the most part.
Well, I guess it depends. I'm not I know what you're saying. They can have complex parts, but I do understand what you're saying in terms of,
Yeah.
like, they tend to follow a similar formula
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
how they
Um,
approach the writing.
I mean, the complexity of the I more mean the complexity of the
Diversity, I
writing.
think, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Diver
yeah. Well, I think the complexity of the writing is different than the complexity of the playing, because I do think some of the more difficult horns that I've heard played are in ska music because it's that
Mhm,
constant, like, upbeat, like, burst sound, like,
mhm,
like, you know what I'm talking about.
mhm.
So I do think the difficulty factor is there. I'm just talking about the complexity of the writing,
Okay.
which I think sometimes can be a little repetitive because they're also you're working with a narrower canvas in this type of music than you are in other places where you hear horns,
Mhm.
namely like classical music and or like progressive music, things like
Jazz.
that, where you're kind of widen jazz, of course, but
Mhm.
where you're widening that. I mean, there really is no canvas in jazz. You're just like throwing paint at an entire wall and
Depending on the
something good
style of
happens.
jazz, but yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Either way, I enjoyed this album. I do think it is a green album, as you mentioned, and I expect there will be growth in the future.
Oh
And I
boy.
will take us to that growth. I'll take us to hangups.
Oh boy. Oh boy, what happened?
There's growth.
Excellent.
There's growth. This album is only a year later, but clearly a group that found a lot more of their sound, we'll say. And I enjoyed it. These are also it happens to have a couple songs that I'd recognize at this point, namely Superman.
Yeah. That one.
Yeah, that one big song. But he wasn't even like it wasn't noticeably the best song on the album, which I think is important because I do think when you have one song that you recognize, like, you kinda have that nostalgia, and it's definitely
Mhm.
there. Because
Oh,
when
yeah.
I finally got to that song, I was like, "Oh, cool. Here we go. This is why we're doing this band." You know?
Yeah.
But the whole album, I think, was just noticeably stronger and still managed to avoid the monotony that, that skate punk ska sound
Yeah.
can get.
Yeah, I do think this album is definitely more of a ska punk album than the first one for sure. And Superman, I think, is a perfect song. I think it's an A plus song.
Sure.
Like it's perfect. I love everything about it. Um, but I was also again surprised a little bit about how few horns exist. I thought maybe that would be part of the change. It's still it's still not as much, but I guess it could also be one of those situations where you just appreciate them that much more on the songs that they're there. Because overall, like I agree with you. It was a better album. It was growth from this band in pretty much every way. Um, it's this album compared to like this one. I would definitely I'll re-listen to this.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it for sure. So that brings us into Never Look Back, and I get to an issue that I have with maybe this entire pop punk adjacent genre of this time,
Okay.
which is it's maybe th- the style of production that has changed since the 90s. Once this type of music feels a little overly polished or a little overly sanitized, it cuts the edge right off of it. Like there's just something about modern production techniques that corporatizes it. I don't know how best to say it. Like just the sound of the record itself, if not even the songs and the writing, just feels like it's lost something. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're
Okay.
saying. I do agree with you too.
Okay.
I think that this album is just too clean.
Yeah, exactly. Like and this even from the first track, I think they still have like good hard rock songwriting chops. Like they have good riffs. They still are incorporating horns in some of the songs, which helps. I think I mean, in terms of the actual quality and performance of the songs, it's good.
Yeah.
Like it's a good album by a good band, but because it sounds just a little bit different in the way that it's recorded compared to Hang-Ups, like it doesn't catch me the way the Hang-Ups did.
Yeah,
It
listen,
just doesn't stick that way.
I agree with you. What I will say to kind of juxtapose that a little bit is it does sound a little too clean and polished, and it
Mhm,
does lose a little bit of that edge. However, the 2 most important parts of an album, I think, of the 3, the 3rd is production, which
mhm.
we've already kind of knocked. But the other 2, which is the talent of the group and the writing, are
Yeah,
both there.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, like, that's very important. I think
Yeah,
that it's very common, especially, like, especially for the punk genre
mhm.
in full, whether it's ska punk, punk rock, skate punk, the whole umbrella. Part of the charm of it can be that the group just says, like, "Fuck you" to sounding good or writing good,
Right, or,
and
like,
that's, like, part
even
of it.
there's just, like, a little bit more humanness to the performances because they're very good musicians. It's,
Yeah.
like, 99% right, but, like, it feels human.
Yeah,
It
no, no,
hasn't
no,
been
no, what I'm
perfectly
saying is for, like, a lot of artists who approach punk from the way that I just said it, where they, like,
mhm.
kinda don't give a shit about how it sounds or the
Sure,
writing or anything. As they get older and lose the young people edge,
sure.
it just sounds, like, awful.
Mhm,
Whereas because this group, like, clearly cared about how they sound and clearly cared about the writing and stuff and
mhm.
the music, even though they still have lost a little bit of that edge, the talent is still there. And I think that's just an important positive. It's definitely not my favorite album. It's probably my third of 3,
Sure.
but there are positives to it.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah,
So let me talk a little bit about this group. So, first thing, I'll get one of my 6 degrees out of the way quickly, which is on all these records, we kept mentioning that there were no horns in the band, but there were, in fact, horns on a lot of the songs.
correct.
That's partially due to the talents of Dan Regan and Scott Klopfenstein from Real Big Fish, who do provide the horns on several of the albums.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Love Real Big
yeah,
Fish.
exactly. Yeah, very cool. Um, to go along with that, so we haven't talked about the specific members of the band yet,
No.
um, but the main songwriter, lead vocalist, guitarist is John Feldman. And John Feldman, before he was in Goldfinger, was actually in a band called the Electric Love Hogs, which great name.
Yeah.
Gotta love it. And he was in this band with a guy named Dave Kushner, who you probably wouldn't recognize the name, but you would know that he played with Danzig, who we have in
Oh,
fact
yeah.
covered on the podcast, and he played with Dave Navarro. And then not that long ago, we covered Jane's Addiction.
Yes, that's true.
Yes. And Feldman is also just like a super prolific producer. So he has produced records for other bands that we've covered, such as 311, Blink 182, Avril Lavigne, Panic at the Disco, and Real Big Fish.
Wow, wow. Fun mention of
Very
Avril
busy.
Lavigne there. There's one more 6 degree.
To Avril Lavigne.
Yeah, because she was on
Oh,
that
because she
last
was.
album.
Oh, yeah. Well, that too. I was going to say what would because she was married to what's his face
No, just
from the other
because
band.
she physically her voice is on the
Okay. I
last
thought you
album we
wanted me to
listened to.
take a seventh degree.
No, no,
Okay.
no. Just because we've covered Avril Lavigne and then she was
That's
on
true.
that album.
Yes.
You know,
That's very true.
I just thought that
Yeah.
it would relate.
Yeah, it does relate a little. A little. Highlight. Um, I didn't want to just like pick a song or anything necessarily here. So I went with their generalized success in both film and video games.
Sure.
So a couple, 3 songs, like the 3 that I knew best by them were one, everyone knows their cover of 99 Red Balloons, which was featured in Not Another Teen Movie, Euro Trip, and the Rocket Power movie, Race Across New Zealand, as
Honestly, the
well as,
most
yeah,
important of the 3.
absolutely, as well as Sonic the Hedgehog 3. They also covered More Today Than Yesterday by Spiral Staircase, which is known for being on the Waterboy soundtrack. And then most importantly, Superman.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, Superman is so iconic to the video game Tony Hawk's Pro Skater that there was a documentary that was done on that video game in I think 2020, and uh, pretending I'm a Superman, the Tony Hawk video game story is what it was called. So like it is um, so
Yeah.
deeply tied into the ethos of that video game that they literally named the documentary about it after the song. And I couldn't tell you one other song that was on that soundtrack, even though I played that game for hundreds and hundreds of hours as a
Oh,
child.
yeah. I'm sure the second I started listening to the soundtrack, I would know every word to every song. Like,
But the only one I
yeah.
know is Superman by Goldfinger, which I actually had. I kind of transitioned there. I had that as their unique thing as well. Um, the documentary being named after it and everything.
Yeah.
So, um, as far that was the highlight and the unique, which are tied together. So I'm going to go into the low light, which I had a little bit of trouble finding. Like I didn't find too many things that were necessarily negative about the group. One of the original members, drummer Darren Pfeiffer, left the group in 2016 because he had personality conflicts with Feldman, allegedly. After all
Okay.
that 22 years or whatever, so um, that's kind of that. Like they never publicly defamed each other or anything like that. It was just like he's leaving the group. That was kind of the closest thing I could find to a low light. If you want to talk about John Feldman himself, I don't know if it's a highlight for him really, but you could stretch that it's a low light for the band because Goldfinger, while earning a Canadian gold and getting charting singles, and I believe they got maybe like a platinum out of 99 Red Balloons, but they never got an American gold on a record. John Feldman, however, produced 16 gold records, 8 platinum records, 1 double platinum record, and 2 triple platinum records. So he was producing
Wow.
all sorts of super successful stuff while not being quite able to get there with his band.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm sure he would be like just grateful that he's helped produce all of these very popular albums, but
Yeah.
you could twist it, I suppose, in a way to make it seem like a low light for them.
Sure.
And then,
He's Moses. What can you
yeah,
say?
exactly. He's like Magic Johnson.
Perfect.
He's dishing off so many assists. He's John Stockton.
Hey, it's a trackable stat. It
Yeah.
counts.
All right. Mean, I couldn't find anything for Mean other than I guess maybe if you want to talk about like the one guy having to leave the band. Nice though. One, John Feldman is an avid animal rights activist. He's given to a lot of like various animal related causes. And my favorite fact about this band ever
Oh, okay.
is they have a song called FTN. That's an acronym.
Okay. Okay.
Do you know what it stands for? Their song FTN?
For it. Okay. It. My first guess is fuck the Nazis.
You're so close, but just like pick one of them in particular that we really hate on this podcast.
Is it Ted Nugent?
This song is called Fuck Ted Nugent, and it's great.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they wrote a whole
Is
song.
Goldfinger my favorite band ever?
They have to be now. I think we
That's a
did, in fact, find the
honestly
greatest
that
band.
jumps them.
Yeah, the fact that they wrote a song called Fuck Ted Nugent, wonderful.
I mean,
Love it.
truly
Big
couldn't
fan.
agree more.
Exactly.
Actually, I do disagree. Nobody should do that.
No, God, no.
Not a
Especially not the
single
people he's
person.
interested in.
Well, yeah, that's true. They're not old enough.
No, God, no.
God, I was talking to somebody off the air, obviously, and we were talking about like creepy lyrics like that, and I forget the example they gave, but I was like, "Oh, let me just read you an excerpt of Jailbait by Ted Nugent."
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the worst person ever. I hate him.
Well, hold on. Okay.
He's not the worst person ever.
He's
I
not the
was
worst person
exaggerating.
ever. He's not even the worst person alive, which is
No, God, no.
that's a low bar.
But it's only because he doesn't have the power to be the worst person alive.
True.
If you
Yeah.
put
If he did, he would be.
totally. Anyway, Goldfinger, ta-da. Moving on.
All right.
To
Let's move on to Ballyhoo.
So, I know we're live, but no one's watching. But Keith, do you want to? It's only like a minute. Do you want to listen to FTN now that you know that it exists?
Oh man, here's the thing. I want to, but even though
Or it's too
we're
close to live because we're live.
it's because we're live, like
Yeah,
they
okay.
could still copyright strike it. And it's like,
it.
but after we're not live, for sure
Then we're
we'll listen to
definitely gonna listen to
FTN.
it. Okay.
What are you talking about? That's my new favorite band,
Yeah.
my new favorite song. All right. Where is they're not okay, here we go. I was like, they need to at least have their shit on Discogs, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no wiki stuff. I knew that already though.
You just wait. This is just the beginning of having no information.
Oh, I'm aware, dude. I know what you've done. You think I'm not aware of what you've done? All right.
We'll be like, their band's Facebook page said in 2009.
I actually emailed the drummer himself because it's the only way I could get any information. This is what he said. Yeah, by season like 15, it's gonna be like, so we actually had to both join the band to get any information. So we both flew to Nicaragua and joined this musical group.
That's right.
And then these are our findings. We're just gonna we're gonna move from music podcasters to music journalists because we're gonna have to travel the
Yeah.
world.
Or like musical anthropologists, because we live within their culture and then write about it.
Exactly. You get it now. Oh, all right.
Are you ready?
I've got my stuff up, I think.
All right.
Let me get
Okay.
Ballyhoo. Oh, hey Keith. I didn't even realize you actually were here.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even see you. It was so long ago. You might not still be watching, but hello, friend. All right.
Ready?
No.
Okay.
No. Yes.
3, 2, 1.
Ballyhoo is an American reggae rock and punk band from Aberdeen, Maryland.
Okay, so we've said the name a bunch of different ways now. You, of all the people that I know, have to, every time you see it, hear it in the voice of that one professor from Good Will Hunting who they like try to help with Will. And he's like, no more ballyhoo.
Yes.
And that's the only way that I ever hear it.
Honestly, a perfect representation of it.
Yeah.
Ballyhoo is such a fun word, though.
It is.
In general. Like, before we get into the band, which we will in a second.
Of course.
It's a fun word.
Of all the words to have stopped being in circulation 100 years ago,
I think we bring it back.
Yeah. If we're bringing back things that got really popular 100 years ago,
I'd much rather
in the 1920s in Europe than yeah, I will trade ballyhoo for fascism any day of the week.
Wow. I mean, that might be worse than the Luca trade in terms of a lopsided deal.
Yeah, agreed. It's like getting a really fun word for the worst thing ever.
Oh, man. Oh, God. All right. Anyway, Ballyhoo is an American reggae, rock, and punk band from Aberdeen, Maryland. They were active from 1995 till the present day. We covered 3 albums. We started with 365 Day Weekend, which truly sounds like a dream to me.
Yeah,
although I would be so bored by the end of it.
It's called retirement, and none of us will ever do it.
No, yeah, what is that? Retirement. I think that's something.
Grandparents.
Yeah, that's something my grandparents did once. All right, we followed 365 Day Weekend up with Pineapple Grenade.
Yeah.
Which, okay, all I know is that album came out
in our first album.
That's true. I should mention that 365 Day Weekend came out in the year 2000.
Yes.
Pineapple Grenade came out in the year 2013. And then our third album, Shell Shock, came out in 2023.
That's right.
So right off Jump Street, I'll say a very even split of the 3 albums.
Yeah.
Which we don't always get. We didn't get with Goldfinger because if you are just tuning in to what our formula is, we usually cover the first and last albums. And then in the middle, we cover the most successful of those albums. So whether it's charting success or certification success or, whatever we can do to quantify the most successful album.
But if we can't find that information, we usually go with something in the middle.
Yeah, that's true. That'll be our fallback because sometimes a more obscure artist won't have any of that info. So we'll just aim for the middle.
Right.
Or sometimes it's just we aim for the one with the Wikipedia page.
That helps. That definitely helps.
Which none of these have. So, but I'll get us started with 365 Day Weekend. Initial reaction to this band, because I have never heard a Ballyhoo song to my knowledge at this point.
Neither had I.
Oh, this would be like if Green Day was Sublime.
Okay, sure.
It would, and by that I mean like if all of the members of Sublime became a Green Day cover band, you would get Ballyhoo from this album.
It's like pop punk, but it's also reggae flavored and
Yeah, but just the styling of the riffs and in most of the songs was so Green Day-esque. It was interesting. I don't dislike it, obviously, I like Green Day, I like Sublime,
Mhm.
mixing them together sounded pretty good. I thought this album, other than the fact that it's starting to get, into the 2000s, so it's not quite a 90s album, and it doesn't sound like a 90s album, even as much as I just said 2 very 90s bands.
sure.
Uh, I still really enjoyed this more than I thought. I was pleasantly surprised, I'll say. Uh, the ska-ish, reggae-ish elements
Yeah,
of it,
definitely reggae,
more reggae
more
than
reggae,
ska, but
yeah.
the elements of it did add just a little bit of zhuzh, I'll say. And I enjoyed it.
Mhm.
It's a fun listen, I'll say. They're not really scraping too deep
Sure.
into your feels
No,
here. But that's okay. It doesn't always have to be that.
they're
Uh,
definitely not trying.
yeah, they're definitely not trying to, especially the last 2 songs were a little interesting though. And those are, of course, Pimp Master K and, Route 40 Ho. Both songs where I was like, "Ah, okay, we're just having fun now."
Now that
Route
felt a little more 90s.
That did, right? Those 2 songs at the end were made me question everything I had thought for the first 9 songs. I was like, "Okay, cool. I assumed this album was from, like, 2003." And then
Okay,
those
sure,
last 2 songs, I'm like, "Is this album just really futuristically from, like, 1997?"
sure.
But it wasn't. Those songs are just a little dated.
Yeah,
But in a
that's a little dated.
nostalgic way, we'll
Sure.
say.
Yes. Okay, I largely agree with you. I definitely one of my main comments was, this was better than I anticipated overall as a record. Um, I think there are definitely some similarities with Goldfinger, obviously, as we've matched them up here together. Definitely reggae, where the ska or skate punk from Goldfinger was as the like other inspiration aside from pop punk. But they also incorporate a heavier sound.
Yeah.
And Goldfinger, we didn't talk too much about it, but Goldfinger was able to do that in several of their songs as well. Um, and then I was kind of surprised when the song Mad Love came on and there was like partially an acoustic sound. It kind of started out acoustic and the acoustic guitar stayed through it. So it showed, it's just one of those songs that shows, hey, we have like at least one other trick up our sleeve.
I'm a
Um,
sucker for a palate cleanser song, you
yeah,
know that.
exactly. So it's nice to get that on the record somewhere. And I'll jump right into Pineapple Grenade.
Whoa, careful, don't hurt
Yeah,
yourself.
I'll be very careful. And I thought the opening song, the very first track, had a pretty interesting progression. They took like something that was very basic, so it starts out on a 1-6-2-5 for all of our music people out there. Um, but then it goes to a 1-6 flat major 6-5. So they do the little chromatic step down, which gives it a nice flavor. It's if you're gonna write something that uses like those popular, more traditional chord structures, throw in that little bit of something different in to make that movement happen. It really makes the song pop to me.
Not not the progression that you just described, but the actual implementation of that for basically an entire concept, Weezer.
Weezer, sure, yeah,
That
absolutely.
is very Weezer of that,
Mhm.
I think on the episode we did Weezer, I said their big thing is, like, taking a normal pop chord and going left,
Yeah,
like, just
absolutely.
veering away.
Yeah, just
So,
doing something slightly off to get you back to your harmony. So I like that. I think this is a record that at its worst is mostly just like pleasantly forgettable pop rock. Like there's definitely like a poppier end to some of the tunes. Um, but also there's some clever writing. Also, there's some good performances instrumentally. Um, and at its best, like there's some songs on here that are like pretty good. I thought Things We Don't Mean had a really great riff to it. So again, while I will say this album definitely drifts a little bit closer into that popish lane than the first one, it mostly does it well, or at least in a way that is pleasant.
Yeah. So my first note was that album 1 was if the members of Sublime were in fact Green Day.
Sure.
And now this one, my first note is this is if the members of Sublime were Fall Out Boy.
Okay. We've
Uh
progressed.
yeah, we have changed. Uh I agree mostly with what you're saying, although at this point, and I listened to Goldfinger first, so I'm
As did
5 albums deep into our listening. So luckily there's enough difference between Goldfinger and
I think so.
Ballyhoo that I wasn't like really feeling the ska fatigue because
They're
they are more reggae and
they're
that is
cousin genres, but they're not
yes,
siblings.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um that to be said, about halfway through this album, I started really getting nervous because I could hear the, like, noticeable kick up in production element, the noticeable kick up in that poppy
Mhm.
sound,
Mhm.
and I was getting nervous because I knew I had a whole other album to listen to, and I knew that it came out even more recently than this one just based on our
Yeah.
listening pattern. So, I was cautiously pessimistic
Mhm.
about moving forward
Yeah.
and about this album. I thought you kinda said it really eloquently. There are elements to it that are good at its best. I do think more often than not, though, it hovers in that, like, overproduced Fall Out Boy poppy,
Mhm.
hard pop
Sure.
range. And I will take us into Shell Shock, where all of my fears were realized. Ah, this is like if the members of Sublime were in fact 5 Seconds of Summer.
There you go. Oh,
So,
also a band that John Feldman produced.
there you go. And I'm sure whatever album he did went, like, triple platinum
Of
because they
course.
sell albums and singles,
Right.
but it's a very, very overproduced, undervalued pop sound,
Mhm.
and we've really hit that hard now, where I think they sound good in terms of, like, the instruments and the vocals sound good, but the substance of the songs is puddle deep,
Yeah.
and the production is oceanic and expansive.
Sure, sure.
And that all makes for a rough listen for me.
Yeah. So, I largely agree that what I put was kind of where the last album was at its worst, where it was kind of like pleasantly forgettable, but like popish, is where this album has
Is
now
that
hit its peak.
yeah.
Um, the writing to me, this is another issue that bands like this from the 90s run into that I'm sure, discussed before. There are just like when you're in your 40s and 50s, if you're writing the same, like, "Hey, girl, let's go do this stuff and run down to the beach and go into this," like, you're writing the same way you did when you were 20, it starts feeling a little inauthentic. It
Yeah.
starts feeling like, this is okay, come on, guys. We're not doing the things that we did 25 years ago. We're different people now. We're not writing the same songs and having the same life experiences. Um,
And if you are, that's
you are, you're stuck
it's
in Arrested Development.
it's a rough spot. It's a rough spot if you're the same person you were 20, 25 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's
I'm
something a
certainly
lot of
not.
this
I
type
was
of
7.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I think that's something a lot of this type of upbeat rock music can suffer from. It's just falling into that, like, well, this is what we write about, so I guess this is kind of what we do, instead of kind of growing with yourself, even. The
Yeah.
one positive I will give this album is that there were some good rhythmic melodies on here, and I think something that can be undervalued, and this is one thing I'll give pop music credit for, is they're not gonna be creative in terms of how long the song is, they're not gonna be creative in terms of the instrumentation of the song or, exactly, who's gonna sing it or who they're writing for, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes you get some very good rhythm in your melodies, and melody is, of course, at least 50% the actual notes that you're singing, but the rhythm is actually just as important, if undersold totally, not really talked about in terms of the notes of the melody. The rhythm of a good melody can be really, really important and be something that catches you if it's really well done.
Really, really good example of that I just listened to, not for the first time, but again this week. And I'm this is a song that I would be shocked if you don't know, but just
Mhm.
for the audience, it's a song called "Are You Mine" by the Arctic Monkeys,
Oh, okay.
which the entire song is like relatively plain, like melodically. It's a really good song. Like
Mhm.
it's a heavier song than the Arctic Monkeys kind of hit a lot of the time, but the actual rhythm of the melody is so strange to the human ear and what we would consider like lyrical
Okay,
and like
gotcha.
that like that like almost like quatrain-esque lyrical
Mhm.
structure. It's so not that
Yeah.
that it really catches your ear in an interesting way.
So, yeah, that's something I like to give credit for because I feel like it's just something that's under talked about. Like even when people are discussing music, even people who know it, it's just not something that you discuss as much as like what is also the rhythm of behind your
Yep.
melody. Makes a huge difference. So
I
shout out to rhythm.
honestly, dude, fully because I I cannot explain to you what triggers in me when there is, like, really poor, like, structure in the rhythm, and usually it's because somebody's trying to over-sing and,
Could
like,
be, yeah.
overstuff lyrics
Mhm.
into a piece
Sure.
where it's like, "Okay, you're just talking to me,
Mhm.
and there's no rhythm," or, like, whatever word you just picked caused you to have, like, a weird rhythmic aspect to this melody that just really took me out of it for a second. You're right, it is something that's not talked about, and it's something that I think all the good groups just kinda naturally do.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So,
Definitely.
that's that. So,
All right,
I will
Ballyhoo
give
then.
us some facts about Ballyhoo. Now, here's the thing. I'm not saying this to the detriment of Ballyhoo
Certainly not.
because this is not a knock on them in any way. They are not a popular group in the world,
Sure.
meaning their information is sparse at best.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, one thing that I thought was interesting, a unique fact, ballyhoo seems like a rather we've already talked about the interests of the word,
Right.
but we now have to talk about, the interest as a band name. It's a
Of
rather
course.
unique band name,
Of course.
except for the fact that there is another band called Ballyhoo.
Ah,
There is a South African group, also called Ballyhoo, the difference being no exclamation point in the South African
okay, well, that's
Ballyhoo.
a huge difference.
I agree. It changes it that's why I'm saying Ballyhoo instead of Ballyhoo.
They
The
had
American one
chart-topping hits in South Africa in
mhm.
1981.
Yeah, they
We're gonna
might
have
be
to
the
cover
more
them.
popular Ballyhoo, honestly.
Well, they did have a top charting hit somewhere. It spent 19 weeks on the charts.
That's a lifetime.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out.
I know. They could be in the next season.
Okay, yeah, why not?
We'll do the we should have done Ballyhoo versus Ballyhoo, though.
I know, if only I'd known the other one existed. For
I know.
everyone wondering at home, I do have a season lined up where every single week it is bands from a different country outside of your standard US, UK, Canada, um, Australia. Like there's all sorts of other European countries, Central and South America, Asia, Africa. So I got a bunch of other bands lined up, which will be fun to
Yes,
do
you do.
someday.
Alright, so some highlights about Ballyhoo. So here's the thing, Pineapple Grenade is what I would consider their highlight. It is the album that kinda broke through the Billboard Top 200 for them. It was sitting at, 189. It also was on the Billboard Heat Seekers and the iTunes Alternative charts at numbers 4 and 5 respectively.
Okay.
So, it was a successful album for them, their most successful album, hence why we covered it.
Sure.
Uh, they were also listed on MTV's Top 100 Bands to Watch, which a pretty good accomplishment for the
Sure. Yeah.
time. They also had 2 songs that were on Rock Band. We mentioned video game songs for
Mhm.
Goldfinger. This group also does have a couple songs in video games with Rock Band. And then, just a couple other successes for them. They have some tour highlights. Most notably, I think, would be the Warped Tour. They were in the
Sure. Yeah.
2012 Warped
Okay.
Tour lineup, which I think is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, I mean, there's not a ton of information on them. I couldn't find any lowlights. I guess you could call a low light the kind of low ceiling of their success for such a sustained period of time to kind of like break through the industry in a way that they did, where they're producing and selling and things like that. Like,
Mhm.
I would consider them to have broken into the industry, uh, but maybe not reached a height that most people would consider like being a successful act.
Yeah. Sure.
Even though for me as an act,
Oh, definitely.
I would kill for
Yeah.
what they have accomplished. That would be, I mean,
It's
for
great.
if we
Yeah.
got to that level, I'd be like, we've
Very
done it.
cool. Yeah.
How cool is
Totally.
that? So a low light, but really just it is what it
Yeah.
is. Like you achieve success in different levels.
Right.
Meanest and nicest don't exist. This band exists as a band, and they've done nothing mean or nice.
Excellent.
Can confirm. And then the 6 degrees that I have for them, ironically similar to one of yours, they were a popular opening act for 311.
Oh, very good.
So, which makes sense
Yeah.
musically.
Yes. Although I like them better.
Sure, I don't disagree with you.
All right.
At least early. I like their early stuff better.
Sure. Yeah. Are we ready?
I think we're ready to grade them.
Okay. So we'll start with Goldfinger and Cultural Impact. They are the group here that had hit songs.
Yes.
That's got to count for something. 99 Red Balloons was a gold record, and I double checked, and it was a non single, but Superman went gold anyway. Um,
Yes.
and
I
I do think
think
that connection to like the movies and video game culture is something for this group, because even if you're not into music at all, or you're not into that type of music, if you were a kid during the age of Nintendo 64, Superman was
yeah,
something.
you have definitely heard that song. It's in your
Yeah,
brain.
absolutely.
Uh, I don't think it's a
It's
ton of points.
no, but it's like at least gets them in the conversation towards a 2.
I think that's probably a good spot. I think I could live with like a 1-6.
Sure.
Superman and 99 Red Balloons
And
counting
then
together, and then
yeah.
a little bit for the extra oomph of the video game industry.
Ballyhoo, on the other hand, might be one of our point 1 type of acts.
Yes. I Here's the thing. I don't think necessarily a point 1 because of the number of sales and streams and copies, and also they were on Warped Tour and they opened
Okay.
for other larger bands. But
Sure,
I
but
think a
they're less than
point
a point for sure.
yeah, oh yeah, I'm thinking like a point 3,
Okay. I'll
just
allow
not a point 1. A point 1 is like a band that I would consider like Fox, who came in, dropped
it.
one
Okay.
album,
And then we're out.
had no impact other than it's a good album, and then
Yeah,
disappeared off the face of the earth.
that's fair. Okay, Goldfinger is gonna start with 5.2 for their 8 records.
Okay.
Now, like I said, they do have 2 gold singles. Now, usually we say 2 gold records keeps you where you're at. I don't know if we're counting that towards singles or if they're in danger of losing a potential point. Something
No, I would consider singles. I mean,
as long as
it's the same number of sales.
yeah,
So it's not like the certification for singles doesn't change versus albums, it's
okay,
just sales.
fair
So
enough.
I'm fine with it.
All right, and I'll give them a point 2. I'm gonna round them up to point 2 for quality.
Sure. I will give them a point 1. I think it was great music to listen to. The lack of horns was both a positive and negative, so I'm gonna
Sure.
wash that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the 3rd album was fine.
Yeah,
So,
it's mostly from the first 2 that I'm
yeah,
um, but the 3rd wouldn't have lost many things. Ballyhoo, how they're
9.
your group 9 records? Okay, so that's gonna start them at a 5.5.
Mhm.
Now I think sales are gonna come into effect in terms of potentially losing some points here.
Yeah, so here's the thing, just to give some numbers. They have sold this is the top of their Wikipedia page. So, if this information is not accurate, it's literally the first sentence of their
Sure.
wiki page. They've sold over 30,000 copies of their 5 albums and more than 200,000 digital track sales.
Okay.
So,
Now, our points don't change meter is 2 American Gold singles or albums or 2.5 million in total sales.
yeah, which we are not at.
We are not at that.
We are not at that for to be
They're
clear.
not at no sales at all.
Right.
So, I think they have to lose, like, point 0.3 or point 0.4 here.
Yeah, I was thinking point 0.3. I think that's,
Okay.
we'll start them at a 5.2.
Yeah. Now they're your group, so how would you like to treat them?
I was really struggling with this because I liked the first album and I liked
This
parts of the second
Yes.
album,
Mhm.
and I really didn't like the third album, and
Sure.
I really didn't like parts of the second album.
Mhm.
And I think just based on that,
Just
I'm
leaving them
going
alone.
to leave them alone.
I think that's a fair strategy, and I'm ready to move on to instrumental talent, which is something that I think of both of these groups displayed above the average. I think they both showed some good musicianship on these records.
Yeah, I would agree.
Um, it may I mean, the horn section in and of itself doesn't give necessarily an edge to Goldfinger, but they are pretty well done. I mean, like, it wouldn't be just that there's horns, but they're like, the guys from Real Big Fish are good players, man. Um, like, they play well. I think maybe the detriment to Goldfinger was the vocals because he had to kinda grow into his voice, but I do think he has a good voice, and it's unique.
Yeah,
Um, so, I guess I'm giving Goldfinger the edge here, but I don't think Ballyhoo is bad. I think Ballyhoo is good.
I think I think I am more in the middle of both of them because I think their strengths and weaknesses cancel out a little bit. I think Ballyhoo does benefit from the consistency of the product,
Mhm.
even though it's getting more overproduced as we go, which is unfortunate.
Sure.
Uh, I did like both of them. I think that John Feldman did need to grow into his voice a little bit, as you
Yeah.
mentioned.
But once he was there
But once he was there, it's good. I mean, they also have, like, bigger names in the band, whether that
uh,
matters, and, like, their
sure.
past members also include bigger names, like Travis Barker was in Goldfinger for a bit,
For a year, yeah.
for a quick time. Just something to think about. I'm fine giving a little bit of the edge to Goldfinger, although I
Mhm.
don't think it'll really matter in the grand scheme.
No, I don't think so either. But I think Goldfinger earns at least into, like, a 6 for instrumental talent.
Sure, I could
Yeah.
see that. I could see a 6. I think my issue is the instrumental talent of the band does matter, I think, a little more than the inclusion of the horns because they're
Sure.
not on every song.
Exactly.
They're not members
Yeah,
of the
you're right.
band. So, like, I don't wanna give them a ton for
Yeah, no.
bringing a horn
I mean,
section in
I
for a
would
couple
give
songs.
happily do, like, a 6 and a 5.9 or a 6.1 and a 6, like, I think they're close.
I think they're close too, and I think a 6 and a 5.9 is great.
Okay. Songwriting. I think this is something that Goldfinger continued to show that they were good at. There was difference between the first 2 records, and we mentioned that those remaining strength was songwriting in the 3rd record despite the production. Ballyhoo just mostly moved towards the middle for me after the first album.
Yeah.
You know, they were
I
not doing anything other than getting poppier and poppier and more Bleh.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I do give the edge to Goldfinger for most of their songs. The only caveat I wanna give, just so the audience is aware,
Of course.
is we would both agree that I think Goldfinger has maybe 2 hits, but really 1 hit is Superman, but maybe 2 hits,
And one being a
and 1 is a cover.
and then their third best known song, to me at least, is another cover. Um,
Yeah.
but
So,
that doesn't change the fact that I thought that, like, they wrote well on their like, I listened to the album, so what was there was good.
no, for sure, and again, I'm not trying to take points away or anything like that. I just, I think for the sake of fairness, we should mention that, like,
Yeah. I mean,
at
have you ever
least
heard the Nina version?
I've heard I
It's
didn't
different.
it's extremely different. I'm not saying that they didn't take it and make it their own.
Mhm.
Because I agree that they did. It's just something to consider.
Sure.
Either way, what number are you
I'm
thinking in?
still above average on songwriting for Goldfinger.
Yeah,
I think it was a strength throughout. I think I could be in the mid to high fives for them.
sure, I'm fine with that. Why don't we give them like a 5.7?
Very good. Ballyhoo, maybe that first album you can argue is above a 5.
Yeah.
I mentioned specifically what I thought was good on the second album, but it was also the rest of it was trending in the wrong direction, and the third album fully trended in the wrong direction.
Yes, I think that is true. I think the first album was the best of the 3. I do think all 3 did suffer a little bit from, uh, a shallowness in the lyric.
Right, that which will be the next.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, but I do think that it suffered a little bit in terms of the overall. It was a little more punk, and by punk, I mean, like, the punk where you kinda don't care as much. So I think they
But
had a
their
lot of
songs weren't
talent.
unpleasant.
No, no, no. That's
So
not
I still
me.
think I still think this number is probably, like, in the 4 range.
Oh, it is because I think the first album is above a 5.
Mhm.
I think the second album is roughly a 5. I think I liked half, I didn't like half, that
Sure,
equals
sure.
out, and I think the third album's like a 3,
Sure.
and so I think we're living in the 4s.
Yeah, I'm okay with, like, a 4.3, 4.4 or something.
Let's give them a 4.4. I love it.
Alright. And then poetic talent comes into play here. Um, I didn't have a ton to I mean, I think, like I said, I think Superman's a perfect song. I think that is genuinely well written all around,
Mhm.
front to back, lyrics and music.
I do not disagree. I do think that in terms of lyrical depth, neither one of these groups is really reaching
It's
too deep,
sure, yeah.
but I do think Goldfinger has a little bit more eloquence to the
Yeah,
writing.
they were not the group that made me go, are you sure you still wanna write songs like this at this
And
age?"
that is
And
a
that's yeah,
huge relief when that doesn't happen.
yeah. So, I think, again, we're probably looking in the same area, like, Goldfinger is gonna score a little bit higher about than Ballyhoo. Ballyhoo's gonna be under the average.
Yeah.
Um, I would be okay putting Goldfinger sort of right by the middle, kinda playing it straight in that 5 range, unless you
Then let's
disagree.
do it.
And then Ballyhoo,
It's lower.
well, yeah,
It's
it's
lower.
low like, I wasn't offended by anything that I remember hearing in here, um, that I
N
remember.
no. No.
But it's just it was noticeably like, eh, really?"
Yeah.
So I think that, it's probably their weakest category since cultural impact. It's under songwriting, I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I do think this is where we can maybe live in the
The
3-ish
3s.
range.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe like a 3, 4. I
Sure,
think that's a good
you got it.
spot because, like, they're
I'm with it.
again, inoffensive, but completely uninspired lyrics.
And sometimes a little juvenile.
Yeah, a little bit juvenile as well, which gets less and less acceptable the older you get.
Exactly. It's one thing when you were, like, wrote this album and it came out when you were still a teenager, and
Yeah.
it's like, "That's fine. I'll allow it." Alright,
Cool.
X
Cool.
Factor. I We've talked so much about the video game stuff that I think we're just done.
Couldn't agree more.
Excellent,
And
alright.
you would not pay me enough to come up with an X factor for Ballyhoo.
Very good.
I couldn't find a meanest or nicest for them, yet alone an X factor.
Very good. All right. Well, we've got final scores, and we've got a winner
I'm ready.
this week. And our winner is obviously, because they won every category, the winner is Goldfinger.
The clean sweep.
Yeah, the clean sweep with a 23.8. And Ballyhoo, a respectable second place at 19.2.
Wasn't a blowout.
No, it was less than 5 points that separated them here. And for a group to start under a 0.5 with cultural impact and still get very close to 20, I think is good.
Yeah, I think a lot of the middle things helped, and I think the two bookends hurt a lot.
Sure.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Now, next week, we will be going way back in time and examining a couple of early rock legends. So,
Okay.
strap in
Like
for that. I
like Igneous and
Metamorphic will be on the show.
Metamorphic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sedimentary. Those
Gotta
are all
love
the
'em.
types of rocks. They're just the three
It's true.
that's what they taught when I was in school. The three
Yeah,
types
listen,
of
if
rocks.
there's if they, I think
If
they
there's
didn't
a
add
fourth
more
type of
rocks.
rock, I won't allow it.
Come on, they can't have added more rocks.
There are
They
only
already
3
changed
rocks.
math. They can't
Yeah,
also change
can't be
rocks.
doing that.
Either way, guys, listen, do me a favor, okay? I want you to go through your music on your whatever device, your phone, if you listen on your phone, if you are like a music library person, or if you're strictly streaming. And I want you to find your favorite artist. Okay, so just scroll through, find your favorite artist. And then when you pick that artist, I want you to just commit to 30 days of not listening to them.
Interesting.
And instead, go listen to anything else.
I like it.
Expand your musical palette, because this podcast really forced me to do that.
It's a
And
very fun
it's
thing to do.
great. It's
I
a
love
great the more music you discover, the better, because you will learn exactly what you like and what you don't like, and you will learn why you like or dislike things.
And sometimes
Because
you'll just be surprised.
yeah, well, pleasantly so, always. I mean, it's a good thing. So go do that. And while you're doing
I love
that, have a great day. And fuck Ted
Fuck Jerry
Nugent.
Lee Lewis.
Both of them. All right.
All right. I have dinner that has arrived in my house, so I
Love
want to
that
play
for
this
you.
song.
Yeah.
And then we'll
Okay. Guys, we're ending the stream so we can listen to copyrighted material together.
That's right.
But thanks for hanging out.